All right. Good evening and welcome to the June 15th meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. This meeting is being held virtually via Zoom video conference. Please be patient. We'll do our best to be efficient and allow everyone to participate equitably. This meeting is also being broadcast and streamed online by FCTV in real time. As this meeting is being recorded by Zoom and broadcast by FCTV, please be cognizant of what you say, how you say it, and what can be seen and heard in your background. Chair acknowledges the attendance and ever support of our entire staff, Jen, Alyssa, I still have Liz, sorry, Josh, Mark, Amy, and Kristen. And at the moment, we're missing a commissioner, so your appointed alternate is Pat. I'd like to remind the commissioners that for commenting, I'll call on each of you at the appropriate time so we don't speak over each other. And also that the votes have to be done by roll call. So when I call your name, please state your name and your vote, even if you've made the motion or the second. To our public participants, at any time during this meeting, you may enter any comments or questions via the chat function. At the appropriate time, they will be read into the record. The link and further instructions are located on the agenda. Also, Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022 regarding COVID-19 allows for full public participation. Therefore, if you'd like to be heard on a specific hearing, let us know via the chat function. Betsy, something's going on in your background. You keep lighting up. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see, let us know via the chat function. Then at the appropriate time, I will call for public comment. When you are selected, you will be moved into the hearing as a participant. As such, you must have your video enabled, be succinct and respectful of others. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. All right, first up are requests for determination of applicability. First up, Varel Dana LLP, 108 Nashawena Street, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to upgrade the existing sewage disposal system to meet Title V regulations. Melissa.
Recommends a -3 under the state and a -2 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Anyone?
Yeah, second, O'Brien.
Who made the motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was making the motion.
Well, you said second.
Oh, well.
I'll either make a motion or second staff's recommendation.
You're
Yeah,
second.
you can
That's what
choose.
Brian
You.
is, like, right there. All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy.
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin.
O'Brien, aye.
Maury.
Harlow Hawks, aye.
Pat.
Terrace, aye.
Peter.
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Thank you. Next up, Robert and Judith Little, 594 West Falmouth Highway, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a garage, addition, patio, terrace, and walkways. Ms. Bergeron.
Yes, staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
So moved, Harlow Hawks. Gladfelter, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy.
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin.
O'Brien, aye.
Maury.
Harlow Hawks, aye.
Pat.
Terrace, aye.
Peter.
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation.
Excuse me, Jamie, we have someone that raised their hand. If you could type your question into the chat, please. And if you're confused about a negative determination, it actually means the project can go forward and has been approved. Thank you. Okay. I figured it was clarification.
Yeah, I'll have to add that to my narrative of mentioning that. A negative is positive. Being dyslexic, that works for me. All right, I don't know what to make of this name, so I'm sorry if I get it wrong. Mademoiselle S. ARL, 64 Hinkley Road, Woods Hole, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to repair an 80-foot long section of a licensed seawall by hand and to restore any disturbed vegetation in kind. Ms. Bergeron?
Staff recommends a -3 under the state and a -2 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Carla Hawk, so moved.
Gladfelter, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy?
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Maury?
Carla Hawk's aye.
Pat?
Terrace, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, requests for a hearing under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. And as a reminder, commenting is limited to 3 minutes. So I encourage you to stay within the purview of this board, which are the rules and regulations of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw, and how either pertains to a particular application. The chair reserves the right to stop any commenting that is disparaging or inconsequential to the hearing. First up, Gregory P. Hartel, 115 Dale Drive, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to install drainage, construct retaining walls, and pave the end of Dale Drive and the residential driveway at Lot 2 of 115 Dale Drive. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I've promoted Doug Schneider up from Holmes and McGrath to present his project. Welcome, Doug. Doug, you're on mute.
Good evening.
Oh, there you are.
My name is Doug. Yep. Good evening. My name is Doug Schneider with Holmes and McGrath. For this project at 115 Dale Drive. If I can share my screen, I can show
Yes,
you
sir.
the plans that we're dealing with tonight and give you a quick rundown.
Okay.
Can I get the right one here?
Yes, you did.
See the plan there? This project is located at, like I said, at the end of Dale Drive. With the locus map, you can see where Dale Drive comes off of Quaker Lane. And the subdivision dates back to where our lots are about 20 years ago. And go back to the plan. The extension of the Hammerhead area was, like it was built about 20 years ago as a gravel extension of Dale Drive. The pavement ends 100 odd feet before the Hammerhead. And there has been, through the commission, permitted the driveway for Mr. Hartel a few years back under a notice of intent that allowed the driveway that extends straight off of Dale Drive to be paved. My understanding is that order of conditions has since expired. But the construction of the driveway and the house at the end of the driveway has been ongoing for several years now. And they would like to pave the portion of the gravel drive from where the pavement ends, now in front of the Dunphy House property, extending out to and onto Mr. Hartel's property and up to his house. And there's also another driveway that extends, that is paved, that extends to the west off the Hammerhead. The resource areas we're dealing with is there is a vernal pool that exists just to the northeast of the roadway that throws off a buffer zone. There's also a coastal bank because there's the river up in the back that has a FEMA flood zone kicks off the coastal bank, and you have the Falmouth 100-foot buffer zone that is shown in green coming off the coastal bank. So all of the work is within within the buffer zone. And there's actually a constructed retaining wall along the edge of the, actually there's a bit of a shoulder, the buffer zone, buffer area off of the existing gravel that'll remain. The pavement will be just within the area that's currently gravel, and we'll be installing a catch basin and leaching drainage pit to collect the water that's coming down the road and into a leaching pit, similar to what was there originally. The original system had a stone leaching trench along the edge of the gravel that has functioned up until, I guess, this past winter, when there was some large rain and there was some concerns about runoff that had happened, which just leads us to where we are today. I do have some pictures. As you can see, you can see the pictures, I assume.
Yes.
This is the end of Dale Drive where the pavement ends. The neighbor actually has a little bit of gravel area they have to go through before they get onto their property. And let's see if I can keep going through these. This is looking back up Dale Drive from about the midway point of the hammerhead, and you can see it's become a little bit of a mud hole here. Off to the right is where the retaining wall is. This is a view of the Vernal Pool from up on top of the retaining wall. You see it's a little water hole that's down in the low area there. This is the driveway that goes off to the northwest. Would be paving right up to that driveway. And this is a view looking up Mr. Hartel's driveway towards his house that's under construction. So we'd be paving in the existing gravel area. It'd actually be a little bit smaller than what's used as gravel, or where the gravel traveled area is now. Give it more of a more defined area. Just another view. And then this is looking more from Mr. Hartel's driveway, looking down Dale Drive. And you can see the area on the right of the picture there. The retaining wall is just off the side, so there maintains a nice little buffer between what would be the pavement and the retaining wall. We do call for limit of work on the plan for the hay bale, straw wattles and silt fence along the limit of work up basically at the top of the retaining wall. And we're looking for approval from the commission to proceed with paving this area. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you, sir. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schneider is a little new to this project, I think. So we've been struggling with this area for a while now. It's even before this past winter, when we had some past winter and fall, when we had some pretty heavy rains. We've gone down that slope towards that Vernal Pool multiple times to see the runoff from this area. And I just think there's no other way to protect that Vernal Pool other than to pave this area. It's been a problem for a while. So staff fully supports paving with the appropriate drainage to try to further protect that Vernal Pool. I don't know if Alyssa has anything to add. Alyssa, have you gone down that slope? I know Kevin's been down there, and I think even Brendan was down there.
I haven't been down. And I have no other comments. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, commissioner comments, questions, Betsy?
I was glad to see you had our town engineering staff look at it also. It's fine. It'll be good to have this done.
Okay. And Courtney's not in yet. Kevin?
I would tend to agree with Betsy.
Maury?
I think it's long overdue. This has been a perennial erosion problem that entire development was, has been a scar. And to see that vernal pool being protected, I just hope they pitch it correctly and that and when we do the findings, that the catch basin's maintained so that when it fills up with stuff that they take care of it, because
That brings me actually to a question I had, Maury, if you don't mind me jumping in here, Mr. Chairman. Doug, who is going to be responsible for the maintenance of the system? We had that question. We were talking internally at staff level.
The end of Dale Drive here is private. This section, part
Okay,
of the paving, the town layout ends just before the little hammerhead.
yep,
So it would be the responsibility of the two owners that are coming off of the hammerhead there. And I
okay,
believe there's a homeowners association for that. I believe, I could be wrong.
okay, thank you.
I mean, I think once it's all vegetated and finished, there won't be a lot of runoff at that point, but during construction, it's got to definitely have a regular maintenance program going on, because it'll just fill up and it'll be useless. And that's all I have to say.
You, Pat?
I saw in the narrative that the applicant had rebutted the presumption of significance of the coastal bank. And I want, Jen, can you put that information in the record? This is within the buffer to a coastal bank, is that not correct?
Yep.
And it was rebutted in a prior order. Findings were
That is a
made.
finding. Okay, yes. I can do that.
All right, and also, Doug, you just explained something that I had a question about, that the hammerhead is where the private ownership is. Up to that point, it's town owned, and the work is being done on land, on interest in the private way owned by the applicant, but also by another party you indicated. Has that person granted your client authorization? And can you put that in the record as well to perform this work?
To the best of my knowledge, that they're working together to get this done. The abutter, who's also coming off the hammerhead, like I said, their house is a couple of years old also and is paved right to that gravel point that we'll be paving up against.
But the paperwork shows that the applicant is one party. It's just to dot the i's and cross the t's. When you're doing work on property that's jointly owned, you need authorization from the other party if they're not an applicant. Maybe they could just sign your application as jointly applying.
I think we can arrange for that.
Right. I have no further questions or comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Peter?
I agree with Maury.
Steve?
I agree with Jennifer. Anytime she's going to propose impervious service in a endangered and important area, I'm there.
Doug,
All
is
right.
it a condition that you have to get Robert Ouellette's, excuse me, signature prior to starting the project.
All right, Jen, is there anything in the public chat function, please?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Arlo Hawk, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Is there anything else? All right. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Maury,
Arlo Hawk's aye.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you very much for your time. Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Next up are continued hearings under notice of intent. First up, Harvey P. Stein Trustee, Harvey P. 57 Moonpenny Lane, Falmouth, Mass. For permission to construct an addition, reconstruct an existing deck, and install mitigation plantings. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant has withdrawn their application.
All righty. Therefore, next up, Robert Sperry, RSC Realty Trust, 134 Antlers Shore Drive, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a shed, remove existing landscape timbers, and install mitigation plantings. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have promoted Mike Borselli up for this continued hearing.
Good evening, Mr. Borselli. You're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. This is a continued hearing. We received comments from staff and feedback from commissioners at the last hearing, and we made revisions to the plan as a result. To refresh your memory, I have the original plan I will show you here, which was basically for a proposed shed that was in this location. There was a determination that this wasn't in accordance with the regulations because it's forward or closer to the wetland resource than the closest portion of the existing primary structure. So we went back to the drawing board and we revised the plan. And this is the revised plan. We made the shed smaller. We shifted it back. So it's actually towards the front of the house. Instead of 99 square feet, it's 84 square feet, measuring 7 by 12. And it's placed here. We had to pick either the top of the slope or the bottom of the slope to make this work. So since we couldn't have it here, we moved it up to the top of the slope. So the shed will be, the doorway to the shed will be right at the top of this little grass coastal bank slope. This was the access where they walked around the building. Now it's sort of difficult to walk. It's a flatter grassy slope than the other side. This is steeper. So in order to be able to gain access around the house, they want to put some landscape steps to ease the slope, make it easier to walk down this slope. It gets a little slippery when the grass is wet. That'll allow for that. There were 2 staff comments. We had not accurately shown the walkway here. It had been adjusted and turned, so we went on and measured that and added that. He had rebuilt the deck in the same footprint. We did not show these steps that were built. There's 3 1-foot by 5-foot steps here. We measured those last week. You can see they don't go closer than the closest part of the existing structure. But we accounted for those. There's 15 square feet. There's 84 square feet here. There's 30 square feet there. All subject to a 3-to-1 mitigation. And when you do the math, it's 135 feet, applied a factor of 3 is 405, requires 4, we're proposing 410. So we're proposing 205 in this green area, and we're proposing 205 in this green area. I think that sums it up. There was 1 staff comment that we neglected to show this tree had been removed. So I can submit a revised plan that shows that tree is removed. And also, this isn't concrete patio. He put decking on top of the concrete patio, so I can take the word concrete patio off and it's all 1 deck. So I hope that satisfies the commission, and I'm hoping you'll allow me to just make these labeling changes and hopefully we can close the hearing. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mike. Jen?
Excuse me. I don't have any questions. The only comment I'll give you, Mike, is we'll let you know the number of shrubs for both those little blob areas, okay?
Yeah, I'm sure Mr. Sperry wants to reach out to you and talk about that. He wants to get the shrubs before the wholesale nursery closes, and he hopes to get them in the ground as soon as possible.
Okay, we'll help him out with a count.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. Anything to add, Alyssa?
Nothing to add.
All right. Commissioner comments, Kevin,
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Maury,
Just the oak by the shed will be protected. Am I correct, Mike?
Yes.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
No questions, thank you.
Peter,
Thank you, Mike, for dealing with the client and getting it in accordance with the Falmouth regulations.
You're welcome.
Steve,
No questions. Thank you.
all right. Betsy,
Oh, looks good. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jamie.
all right. Jen, is everything in the public chat function?
Nothing in the public chat, Mr. Chairman. I just lost my agenda. Oh, there it is.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Carlo Hawk, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. If there's nothing else. All right, Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Maury,
Carlo Hawk's aye.
Terrace, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Borselli.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Next up, excuse me, Marie Russell, Marine Biological Laboratory, 100 Water Street, Woods Hole, Mass, for permission to install a concrete stem wall behind an existing seawall. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the applicant has requested a continuance until June 29th.
So moved, Carlo Hawks.
Gladfelter, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to continue this until 6:29. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Maury,
Carlo Hawk's aye.
Pat,
Terrace, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have continued this hearing until 6:29. All right, next up, Sarah Tirano Flores, Nutter, McLennan and Fish LLP, 24 Willis Lane, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to conduct Phragmites management and to install a cobble reinforced high marsh. Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have promoted Seth Wilkinson from Wilkinson Ecological Design, Sean Riley from Coastal Engineering, and Sarah Tirano Flores from Nutter and what is it? Nutter and McClellan?
McLennan.
Nutter, McLennan, and Fish.
Yeah, thank you. To present their project. Anyone else, Seth?
I think it's the three of us,
Okay, perfect.
and I'll jump right into it. The first thing I would say is I'm Seth Wilkinson, for the record, Wilkinson Ecological Design, and we have spent more time with staff than we typically would with a project. But given the technical nature of this, this is I think a more progressive project. I feel that's been time very well spent. Really appreciate Greg Berman's insights as well. And I think we've worked very collaboratively and have come up with some revisions that I hope you are pleased with. But there have been a couple of revisions. We haven't really had any testimony yet. So I will try to be as clear as I can when I'm presenting. I'd like to just start briefly in sort of framing sort of the big questions. Why now, and how are the three big ones that I see with a project like this. As I've mentioned to Jen and Greg and Alyssa, this is a unique project because we're proposing to do some salt marsh restoration and really has nothing to do with coastal stabilization right now. This is a stable area. So while you have seen a project somewhat like this across town, which was really focused towards managing erosion. This is about preparing for the future. The family, which resides at 24 Willis, commissioned a study with Epsilon Associates sometime back, just to sort of understand the site and understand how it might respond to sea level rise. That study was completed. It was completed prior to the most recent NOAA report, which just came out a few months ago. And unfortunately, the predictions in the NOAA report were more problematic, higher rates of sea level rise projected than even the Epsilon, which was using the best information at the time. And so they expressed a concern about this. They have young children. They're hoping to pass the property along, and it is a low-lying property. There's two primary components to the project. One is Phragmites management. You've certainly seen that before. And that is really, it's the Phragmites management because of the work in the salt marsh that triggers the necessity to go through the limited ecological restoration notice of intent, which is what we've done. So there's been notification in the environmental monitor, and we've received some comments back. And so that is all proceeding as most Phragmites projects do these days. And then the more innovative aspect is coastal adaptation, where we're trying to prepare for the likely sea level rise, which we anticipate occurring in the decades to come. And how can we sort of prepare the site for that so that we can, rather than try to sort of hold those waters back, you let them come in, but not at the expense of losing lots of vegetation, sort of prepare that salt marsh, that halophytic salt marsh vegetation, get it established, start the beginnings of a peat bed, which would support a salt marsh. And as you know, working with Greg and Jen and Alyssa, we were able to really just completely eliminate the need for any cobble. The initial concept was we were looking to have some ballasting to help the marsh sort of survive in the times in which it may not be quite as calm as it is today. But we considered it extensively and feel that if we can use this, the next decade essentially to really build up that root mass of some halophytic vegetation, then we should be able to embrace that sea level rise, let it move in, and know that these plants will tolerate those higher salinities, higher inundation periods that are expected at these low-lying portions of the property. Which sort of leads me to the next phase, which is, well, why now? I mean, it's probably going to be, at least a decade before we start to see impacts to what's now upland vegetation. We are unfortunately seeing considerable amount of stressed upland vegetation. For those of you that have seen this site, the sassafras grove is not looking great. The canopy is about, depending on which area you're looking at, 50%, I would estimate, of what it should be. Lots of holes in the canopy, not at all a robust colony of sassafras. And if it was just the sassafras, I wouldn't be as concerned because it'd probably be something species specific. It might be a pest or some other stressor on the plant. But then you also see it in the black cherry, you see it in the oak, you see it in the bayberry. You even see it at the high tide bush in some areas. And, all over Cape Cod, we can see where high tide bush is now getting too much tidal inundation, and those colonies are dying or trying to migrate landward. So this is, sea level rise is already, I believe, impacting this site. And rather than sort of wait for everything to be impacted and have this sort of dead zone, which we see from salt fairly frequently, let's see if we can prepare for that. And the reason why we feel now is the right time to do it is we have just made a disturbance fully permitted by this commission to remove invasive species. We've not yet replanted. It just started in the fall. And so looking forward, if we plant this, I believe within 20 years, these plants will be impacted by sea level rise if we plant them as proposed at the elevations proposed. And certainly when I was back in school, which was in the last millennium now, we were certainly trained to look out beyond 20 years. You know, you're looking for the full life cycle of the plants and the plant community evolving. And so as a designer, I have a problem saying, yeah, well, a lot of this vegetation is going to die in 20 years because sea level rise. And given that there is really very limited vegetation in this area where it's proposed presently, we feel like this is really the time to do that. And then still the mitigation, the restoration, planting, which was all part of the prior approval, that would all still go in their exact location. All the planting specs are already in place for this area to be fully revegetated. We would transplant all the materials that are that would be otherwise covered up by this raising of slightly raising of the elevation. We have done this before. We've taken trees for flood projects, actually thinking of a project I worked with Sean on in Chatham, where we just kept the tree location, the exact same location, just lifted it up a foot and replanted in exactly the location. A lot less transplant shock for a tree when it goes right back into the same whole bacterial and fungal community in the soil that we know is very important to trees in particular, as well as most woody plants. So really not expecting any loss of any vegetation. This is about giving the vegetation that's there its longest possible life. And then if we can get this 15-foot wide strip of vegetation established and that, you know, the root zone really, really robust and the peat starting to form. Of course, peat won't fully form until it gets to be an anoxic condition because that's how peat forms. That's what gives you that whole rotten eggs, this hydrogen sulfide smell when you dig into a salt marsh. None of that can occur until it's tidally inundated, but we can put all the other pieces in place and be ready for that to move in. As opposed to just like planting in mineral sands, at which I would put very low likelihood of success. You know, we could plant all of this area the way it is right now and just sort of with halophytic plants, let the sea level sort of come in on its own scale and pace. But I think that unfortunately, we've seen in other projects, direct planting does not usually work for salt marshes. You really need to establish some sort of a peat bed for those plants to really root into long term. So that's sort of both the why now and the how are you going to do it. I think Greg's report was quite clear. I'm happy to answer any questions that might have resulted from that. Questions from staff and questions from the commission. Appreciate the opportunity to present so far.
Staff, it would be helpful if you could put the plan up and kind of show the board where it is and then maybe go through that kind of bottom schematic. Absolutely. Bear with me. I always forget which towns staff does it and which towns. Oh, I apologize for that. No, it's no problem at all. I can easily do it. I just didn't have it up. I had it on a different computer, so. If you need me to bring it up, I can do that real quick. Also, the salt marsh migration sheets probably would be helpful to review as well. It's coming right up. Okay. Okay, how's that looking?
Pending.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, great. So just zooming in a little bit. Initially, I'm not gonna have this exact, but initially, so here's this sort of crescent shape of the marsh, you know, tying into existing contours at either end, and providing some sort of, you know, long-term, I think, flooding protection to this corner of the house, which is the lowest elevation. And initially, you can see my cursor, right?
Yes.
initially we were sweeping around almost twice the length and coming in like this. But to do that would have involved going into that sassafras grove, which while it doesn't look great, it is still alive. And so we've completely pulled around that, and this basically goes right along the edge of the limit of work for those that saw it initially flagged out. So that's the new shape. It's, if you measure this way, it's about half the length. If you measure it, along the entire length, it's 180 feet reduced down from 300.
Oh, I can't right now.
So that's just sort of bird's eye view. We brought in the mitigation from prior, the prior approval. And I would note this is exclusively the mitigation. There is everything in green is also committed to be fully restored with the plants that were proposed in the prior program. So the only real planting change is specifically within the crosshatched area. And that's where we would propose to get the marsh established. And then it's really better to look at things in cross section. And this is directly off of your filing packet. Sorry, I'm not an expert with a mouse, especially on Zoom. So the way that we thought it would be best to graphically represent this is to show you exactly where the marsh is, where it's was surveyed on the plan, straight from the survey, and that's shown here, and that's kind of in gray. It's a little hard to see. We then took a very conservative approach and just we're trying to rationalize where really would the marsh ideally be growing right now if it could migrate more quickly. The whole premise of this project is we know salt marshes can't migrate quickly enough to keep up with sea level rise. That's one of the reasons we're so concerned with sea level rise. And so when we're designing a salt marsh, we always elevate 9 to 12 inches. And that's not just Wilkinson Ecological, that's just about any experienced firm that does this type of work. And that's to accommodate for the sea level rise, which has already occurred, as well as the fact that young salt marsh plantings of the same species don't have the same tolerance of salinity and inundation period that an established decades old marsh community with really expansive roots. So rather than elevating at 9 or 12 inches, we wanted to be conservative and just elevate it at 6 inches. So, and then showed how that vertical rise relates horizontally, because this is really about horizontal movement. So if we accommodated for the 6-inch rise that we know that marsh would really prefer to be growing in, it's tolerating growing in longer inundation periods now. What that would translate to on a horizontal is where this is shown in green. So ideally, the marsh would be probably about 17 feet further landward if conditions were perfect and if sea level rise was still moving forward at what we saw in the last century, rather than the accelerated rate we've been seeing in this one. Then what we started to do, again, this is just a graphic projection. The only thing I can tell you is, like any projection, it's guaranteed to not be exactly right, but it is directly correlated to the NOAA study because I feel that's the best, most recent information that we have. It's more current than the most recent IPCC, International Governmental Panel on Climate Change. So we projected that just 5 years ahead. Here we see the marsh starting to migrate. This is where we would expect ideal marsh conditions to be in 2027. Now here's where the existing marsh ends there. In 2027, I can tell you it will not be all the way up here. It may wish to, if plants could wish. That's where the ideal plant growing conditions would be from an inundation period and salinity perspective, but they're, it probably will have migrated a little bit, but almost imperceptibly, unfortunately, is what we've been seeing. And then we'll continue to see that 10 years from now. 10 years from now, it'll be just about where we are proposing to begin this essentially simulated peat bed and marsh planting project. And so basically in year 11 is when those ideal conditions intersect with this marsh. And I think that's a decent amount of time. If sea level rise ends up being a little slower, which I think we're all hoping for, then say the marsh has 15 years to develop its roots, even better, great. But I do think 10 years is sufficient. That's a pretty long time for root development for marsh species. And just sort of, moving forward in our little time machine, 2037, more than half of this area will be colonized. And by 2042, the entire area would be ideal marsh growing conditions. And now it's even extending further landward. And I would have much higher comfort level with the areas landward of this simulated peat bed supporting marsh migration, because we've placed this at the lowest possible grade that we can, as Greg noted in his report. We've sort of brought as much fill out of there as we can. So we have this nice level runway, which is another thing that salt marshes really like. But they'll have a wonderful fibrous, dense rooting medium from which to spread from, rather than a drowned, degraded area that's already trying to tolerate too much inundation period. That's one of the reasons is marshes, it takes a lot of energy for a marsh to move. And if it's already struggling from having far too much salt water sitting on top of it, then it would be ideal. Then it's not going to be able to use that energy it needs to then migrate. This is really providing a head start for those plants. And so then again, by 2047, projecting out, which is about the extent of the report. The report went out to 2050. And again, based on NOAA, they're anticipating roughly a foot and a half, a tenth of a foot less than a foot and a half of sea level rise, potentially by 2050. And again, I think this site would be well suited for that, if that were the case, because it would have this great rooting system. And then, through all these, I should have pointed out earlier, but here's where the mitigation plants have been proposed since the last approval. That's not changed at all. We're proposing to keep that exactly the same, just to be able to plant them at a little bit higher elevation than originally proposed. So thank you again for that cue, Jen. I can leave this up if there's questions. I'm happy to speak to it.
Jen?
Yes, 1 second, Mr. Chairman. So I think it would be easier if you took the plan down.
Sure.
Yeah. If they want to look at it again, that's fine. Just a couple of things, just to clarify for the commission, all the cobble is removed from this project. So your base is going to be consist of what? The core fiber rolls?
Yes, it would be roughly equal parts of compatible sediment, same sediment that's there presently, an organic compost to provide food and the right bacteria and fungal inoculants for a healthy marsh, and then just loose, completely natural coconut fiber. And the coconut fiber, the loose coconut fiber, essentially the material that they stuff into fiber rolls. I'm sure you've all have seen fiber rolls. We just break open, or usually they get broken up in shipping, and then we set them aside and use them for marsh projects. But that, if you think about that fibrous husk from the coconut, that is the closest natural product that we have to simulate the dead roots, which are a significant component in a peat bed. So peat is primarily comprised of sediment, living plant roots, and dead, very slowly biodegrading root mats. And so the coir is meant to provide those sort of long fibers that you would that are commonly found in marsh from decaying root material, slowly decaying root material.
And it's landward of the BVW. I know that was a question that kept coming up. It's landward of the BVW, so this system is not going to be in the BVW.
Absolutely, yeah. It comes close in a couple of locations, but it definitely does not intersect.
Okay. And all of the existing veg, you're just gonna pick up and drop back down, as well as put the mitigation that was originally proposed in this location, that's gonna go right on top.
Yes.
Okay. Can you confirm just the overall height of it for us? I know it slopes up and its maximum height is, I think it was 2.5.
So that the thickness of the pillow, the marsh pillow, essentially this growing medium, is 1.5 feet, 18 inches, top to bottom. We did angle it slightly more, again, in response to the communications in the field with yourself and Greg. We wanted to, again, just get that as level of a sort of a salt marsh migration runway. So we tilted the front end down because we are looking for that approximately 18 inches of rooting medium. But that can, that doesn't have to be all right on the surface. We can tuck it down so that it's a nice gentle slope, and that's what we've done. As far as the elevation at the landward edge, I believe we are at 3. Bear with me just one second. I'm checking my plans.
I think that's one of the questions that Greg had was, again, what is the height?
Yeah, it wasn't, I thought he was asking about like the nominal height of the pillow. And that is definitely 1.5 feet from top to bottom. The elevation changes because it's a slope from seaward to landward. And so the top of the marsh on the seaward edge is right about it at 2. And then I believe it's 3.5 at the landward edge, 15 feet landward of the seaward edge.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman, unless Alyssa has anything to add. You're on mute.
Thank you. I don't have anything else.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner comments. Maury.
One thing I want to make sure we put in the findings is, and I'm glad to see that we're getting rid of the cobble, because this was a raised building and it doesn't meet our performance standards because it's new construction, so that it never gets revetted, and we put that in the findings. I know right now where it's been eliminated from this project, but it always surprises me when they raise a building that they don't move it back or up when they know that there's climate change and sea level rise. But I guess the 6-foot wall helps an awful lot of that. It's actually an armored house instead of an armored coastal bank or marsh. And other than that, it is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is the first floor elevation of the house?
I defer to Sean on that.
Because it's not, it wasn't on
14.5.
15.5?
14.5.
14.5. So not a lot of planning for the long term. Thank you.
Pat.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Peter.
No questions. Thank you.
Steve.
I think this is a remarkable project. I have no questions, so I think the explanation was comprehensive.
Thank you. Betsy?
Yeah, I just have a little question, a theoretical question for Seth and Sean. And that is, if this is so I work on coral reefs, right? You talk about keep up, catch up, give up reefs. And this one you're saying is getting into a give up salt marsh situation because it's starved for sediment. And we all know the water quality has declined, but do you think this is like an additional example of how armoring in the past in areas have changed normal sediment supply?
That's a good question. I can't say, I don't know if I could point to any direct, I mean, you've got so much, there's a lot of armoring in this part of town. I mean, the inlet has jetties on either side of it. There's an extensive revetment on the seaward side on this property, as well as I believe all the adjacent properties into Green Harbor. There are some coastal engineering structures. So certainly there's sediment that is unnaturally bound up. But we have seen salt marsh decline. One of the studies that we supported, and I apologize if I provided too much information. I figured, you know, it's your choice whether if you wanted to be bored by it or not. But one of the pivotal studies for us, the guiding studies for us on this was Steve Smith and others' work from the Cape Cod National Seashore. And he was looking at Pleasant Bay, which is in our hometown of our office. And we do a lot of work there. And a lot of Pleasant Bay is not armored. And the study I included, as well as a preceding study, demonstrated an alarming amount of salt marsh loss already. So is sediment contributing? I would sort of sediment, starvation contributing to this. It's absolutely exacerbating it. But I think, unfortunately, this marsh would be in trouble even if there were no CESs anywhere in this estuary. It's just, we're just dealing with so much rise. And I would be very open, and I think these clients would be very open to increasing, the elevation of this marsh. That I'm in regular communications with DP. They're not convinced that like thin layer deposition is appropriate in Massachusetts yet. They may change, they may not, but that's still a very difficult thing to permit. So our options for the marsh, the existing marsh, are fairly limited through the regulatory channels. So this is more about can we give this marsh somewhere to go?
Okay, thanks.
Good.
That's all, Jamie.
Okay. Seth, how much vegetation did you say you're going to, I don't know the word you use, raise, pull up and lift?
It's there are 3 to 4 trees, and I know there's 4 trees. It's just one may not have to be raised. I think that'll have to be a site decision. If we can avoid putting something through a transplant, we certainly would, even when it's transplanting in place. But let's just say 4 to be cautious. So four trees would simply be elevated in place, 12 to 18 inches, depending on where they are. And then there are probably, with this reduced scope, approximately 25 individual or less, probably less now, high tide bush, Baccharis helmifolia, which we know transplant well from experience. And those, again, would just be elevated in place, picked up with a spade, and then set right back down. So it's not, there's just, we found very little native vegetation remaining. There is some vegetation further seaward, which would not be affected by this project.
Thank you. Kevin.
No, I'm not going to comment. Thank you. No comment.
All right. Jen, is there anything in the public chat function?
Nothing in the public chat, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Sarah and or Sean, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
I do not. Thank you.
All right.
Jamie, I just had a question.
All right, go ahead.
So you just said you're going to spade them out. Are you running a bobcat down into the bog? How are you spading them out?
This would only be in upland areas. And yes, a small track loader, bobcat-sized track loader with a spade would go down. For the trees, we'd probably need have it on a bigger loader or a small truck but it would be coming down from the upland area. Those trees are within a few feet of the limit of work, and the shrubs are a little further in.
I was
But
more concerned about the backrest.
yeah, backrest could easily be done with a small track loader.
Oh, I know it can be done, but whereabouts is what backrest is being removed? Or
So
lifted?
the backrest within the area that is flagged. I could actually show you some images taken earlier today. This time of year, everything changes by the week. If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Just share my screen briefly.
My concern is that it's not as surgical as you always say it is. So other plant material around it will be impacted.
I think this image will be helpful because with the invasive plant removal, backrest was essentially the only thing left, and all the grasses you see here in this image were ones that we established starting last fall. Should come up momentarily here. So I just need to move you all. This is this blue staking. If you can see that, that's the footprint of the marsh. This is not a tree. This is an old utility pole for reference. There's the seaward edge. Here's the landward edge. So here's one of those backrests. So we'd be coming in this way over this, recently established herbaceous cover, and lifting them out, bringing the grade up, and then putting them right back in. But it's really just a line of backrest, and there's not much else in there.
Okay. As long as there's not any erosion, I'm looking at that limit of work that I can see daylight through.
So this one right here, there's an abandoned limit of
No.
work.
No, the one,
Okay, this one there, yeah.
Like,
I'll certainly talk to the GC about that.
yeah, it's supposed to be properly installed.
Agreed.
What is the success rate of spading that backrest out? Because that's really well established.
Yes, we've had, I don't know if I have an exact percentage, but we've had a very good track record with it.
So we'll just put a finding in that if it doesn't obviously survive, that you'll be putting in the same size backrest.
We can replace backrest, yes.
That size backrest.
Yeah, it can be a little challenging to find it that large, but if we know we have to, we'll find a way. We can't naturally, we can't harvest it. We'd have to find nursery grown, given where it grows, obviously. But it's a very fast growing shrub, fortunately.
Thank you. That's all.
All right. Anything else? All right. What are you thinking, folks?
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Or second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Is there anything else? All right, I'll take the vote. Betsy?
Whitefeld, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Maury?
Hello, Hawks Eye.
Pat?
Terrace, aye.
Peter?
Walsh, aye.
Steve?
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Night.
Good night.
Bear with me one second. All right, next up, Andrew Richard Chused and Samantha Barry Chused, 55 Racing Beach Avenue, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct a terrace, landing and rinse station, to remove a landing and to install mitigation plantings. Mr. Borselli, you're up, sir.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the record, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant along with Elaine Johnson. I think she's in the audience and should probably be in panel in case there's questions.
I impaneled one of her. Oh, here she comes.
Here.
There's two of her.
Yeah. I don't know how I get my face up there.
I'm working on it, Elaine.
Yeah, it's okay.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Forgot how to do it for a minute. There we go. This is a continued hearing, if you remember, 55 Racing Beach Avenue. Staff had some comments. We made some adjustments. We had neglected to include in our mitigation this proposed drip edge here. So we have updated that. That's an additional 45 square feet. Everything else is accounted for: the rinse station, the terrace, this little landing, the other drip edge. And the mitigation planting requirement was for, when you do the calculation, resulted in a need for 1,193, and we're proposing 1,300, a little bit more than 100 square feet extra. And in addition to wanting those revisions, you wanted a more detailed landscape plan. The shape of these green areas, which are the proposed mitigation, are changed. We added a single rail, split rail fence on the edge of the mitigation to discourage mowing. In the detailed plan, if you remember these shapes and then go to the detailed plan, the two shapes, they're not oriented the same as the plan, but this is out in the backyard, if you will, which is this area, and the front yard area here is detailed here, and this is Elaine Johnson's plan. And I don't really have anything more to add except one comment about a question about this lattice panel. This one lattice panel, we would like to keep it because it would allow, it would be placed right here directly behind the house, and it would block this AC unit. That's its only purpose. And I'm here to answer any questions, and if there's questions for Elaine, she's available as well.
All right, thank you. Jen?
Elaine, there's something else you have to do on your computer because I keep trying to promote your other. I've got two of you.
I know. How do I do that?
That I cannot help you with.
I don't either. There I am.
There you are.
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
Good
Wayne,
evening.
do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just wanted to follow through on the great recommendation that Jen made last time, because I hadn't even considered thinking about it, dividing these two plantings into two areas. And I'm kind of happy, well, I'm not kind of, I'm happy with her suggestion because the front planting is in a very extreme exposed site right there off Buzzards Bay. Racing Beach is right along, of course, the beach. And fortunately, there is a nice coastal dune and bank that serves somewhat as a berm to mitigate the force of the wind and the salt spray. But there's an opportunity to use even more material in the rear because, of course, the house shelters it. So that was basically my rationale in designing the plantings. And what I did was leave open the area around the flagpole so that the owner could access the flag without stepping on plants and raise and lower his flag and maintain that existing flagpole there. So the front planting you'll see is actually two sides on either side of the flagpole. And I've listed the plants I'd like to use. And then the rear planting is along the edge of the buffered vegetated wetlands, well off that edge. And I was able to use even more diverse planting in that area. And as I said in my notes, I'd like to space the trees 5 to 6 foot height trees, about 6 feet on center, and my shrubs 3 feet on center, a minimum of 3 gallon size if I can find them.
You're good? All right, Jen?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think the only comment that Alyssa had was is the lattice still proposed, Elaine?
Yeah, the lattice panel is a freestanding panel that's right off the foundation of the house, basically to screen a very, very unattractive mini split air conditioning heating unit. Why it was constructed to be such an eyesore right on the side of their house, I have no clue. But I figured we could do a nice lattice panel there just to screen it.
Right here.
Yeah. The drawing shows it a little further away than it actually would be. It would be very close to the foundation of the house, Jen.
To screen this air conditioning unit.
Yeah. That air conditioning unit is just this big blob. I don't know the proper terminology for it, on the wall of the house. And then there are conduits that go up the side of the house. I've never quite seen anything like it, but it's there.
I can assure you, neither have I. When we saw it, we were like, huh.
What is this? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Anything to add, Alyssa?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
The lattice screen would be in a velocity zone, correct?
I believe it.
Yeah. Why not use vegetative screening?
We need something to support it.
I'm not sure what you.
I just thought that the footprint of the lattice panel is the most unobtrusive thing in that location next to the shower enclosure. It's a very nice looking architectural feature. We certainly can plant a nice vine to go up the panel. It'll serve a be perfect for support. It's a wall pole product. It's it's very attractive, but it's also very, very sturdy. The posts are 5.5 by 5.5, and it's a nice open 5-inch horizontal vertical lattice.
It's just that our regulations do not allow new structures in a velocity zone, but you could mask it with plants. I'm just saying you're not going to be able to comply with the regulations with a lattice screen there.
I think we could make it a condition, and instead we could put some sort of shrubbery to screen it if instead.
Sure.
Right. No further questions or comments, Mr. Chair.
Peter?
I agree with Pat. No further questions.
Okay, Steve?
Yeah, that sounded like what's going to have the issue to resolve here.
Betsy?
No questions, thanks.
Kevin?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Maury?
I agree with Pat. Thank you.
Is the rent station not in the velocity zone as well?
No, the rent station's in the velocity zone.
Jen, is there anything in the public chat function?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Then I'll make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Carla Hawks, second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
Brian, I.
Maury,
Fellow Hawks Eye.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have closed the hearing.
Great. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
All right, next up are vote order of conditions. First up, George and Lori Andrews, 212 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, Mass.
Give me 1 second, Mr. Chairman. Today is the 6th.
Betsy, I show Maury's not on any of these quorums.
She's not on the first one. She's on the second one. She's on Whitecaps Drive. Oh, no, you're correct.
Oh, Maury.
Is that?
You're correct.
Not that I want you to leave, Maury, that's not it, but
You're saying I could be dismissed?
you could be.
You could definitely be dismissed.
Maury.
You look like you could use the rest.
Giving you a hall pass.
She's a team player.
Thank you.
Good night, Maury.
Night, Maury.
Good night, everyone.
No meeting next week, remember that. All right.
This is just a straight raise and rebuild with the little gravel strips. Am I missing anything, Alyssa?
I don't believe so.
No.
It was Mike Porcelli's, right?
Yeah.
With the gravel strips, it required no mitigation.
Yeah.
Very concise presentation. All right, anybody?
Make a motion to push an order of conditions as discussed.
Second.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing further, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions as discussed. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, I.
Pat,
Harris, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Gregory H. Lynch, trustee, John F. Lynch Family Irrevocable Trust, 68 Whitecaps Drive, Falmouth, Mass.
This was Jack's project. They are close, like. Let me find Jack's project. There it is. They're not raising and rebuilding. They're enclosing the deck, right, Alyssa? They're making a deck and an addition.
Yeah, so they're removing the deck, building an addition in the same square footprint, essentially.
And then adding a second story, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, the deck goes down, so they're like enclosing that whole, they're making that whole portion where the deck is a huge addition,
Part
and
of
then
the house,
adding
yeah.
a second story part, and then adding a proposed deck and stairs on the side. And then adding mitigation, they do have to dig for the frost wall. But I mean, it's a
Basic.
pretty straightforward. We just needed clarification on Jack and actually what he was doing.
Yeah, his administrative assistant was kind of, you know. She didn't get it. All right, moving on.
You're talking about me.
Never mind. Anybody have anything they'd like to see in there?
I'm not
Alright.
clear as to whether or not we got a statement from a structural engineer. I
I
thought that was.
understand we did.
Yeah,
Oh,
we did. I
okay.
mean, we were told we did. We didn't see it, but we were told that it's in the record.
Alyssa, didn't we get that? We did get that.
I did, and I forwarded it to the commission. There was 2 PDF documents. One was a letter from a structural engineer. He's from Transition Engineering, Inc. And that was the same day we got the architectural design.
Right.
Great.
I'll make a
All right.
motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Patton second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions as discussed. There's nothing further. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Terrace, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Amy C. White, trustee, Amy C. White Trust, 390 Ecopesket Road, Falmouth, Mass.
This was from Sullivan Engineering, raise and rebuild. But they do need to reestablish a buffer zone from a previous project. And then they're gonna add to that, correct, Alyssa? Yeah,
Yes, they've offered some improvement plantings.
yeah.
I move we issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Patton second.
We have a motion and a second, issue an order of conditions. If there's nothing further. All right, Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Terrace, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, the Scott and Kerry Tellier, Skoker Property Holdings, LLC, 87 Colonial Way, Falmouth, Mass.
One second, Mr. Chairman. This is the bamboo. They're going to put the root barrier, turn the backyard into lawn, but they are going to be replacing some cedars, correct, Alyssa?
Yes, they're proposing 5 to be replanted.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything they want to see in
Are
there?
they putting in a fence as well? Yep, and they're doing a fence. It was good to remove the invasive bamboo.
Or attempt to, at least.
Yeah. They'll be constantly fighting that.
There was a day when everybody wanted that.
I was
All right.
on that list.
It's a pretty plant. Lots of these invasive plants are pretty plants. That's why people bring them in. Then they escape.
Yep.
All right, what are you thinking?
I
I'll
move
make,
with condition as discussed.
Gladfelter second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. There's nothing else. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Terrace, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Craig Deambra, Beckles Road Realty Trust, 31 Beckles Road, Falmouth, Mass.
They're planting 4 additional cedar trees. This is an amended order of conditions to plant 4 additional cedar trees.
I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Can I ask a question? May I ask
Yep.
a question? I have a
Yep.
note about 22 arrowroot shrubs. Is that accurate, Jen?
Yeah, so basically they're removing, so let me clarify, they're adding the 4 cedars, but because they need that 400 square foot, they're removing, I believe, 28 arrowwood from the total mitigation planting. And it comes out to basically the same square footage they're gonna need because the trees they're planting are substantial cedars.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Nope, it's okay.
No, it's
I should have clarified that. Apologize.
All right, I heard a motion. I did not hear the second.
Pat,
Sorry.
second.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. If there's nothing else. All right, Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Terrace, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Joe Jackson, lot 41, 91, and 95, Bywater Court, Falmouth, Mass.
Basically, they're relocating and reconfiguring the driveway.
Kind of basic.
Yeah.
All right, anyone?
I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Pat and second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. If there's nothing further. All right, Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Pat,
Terrace, aye.
Peter,
Walsh, aye.
Steve.
Pat and I.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. And just a reminder, we have no meeting next week. And that's all we have, folks.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Walsh,
second.
aye.
Oh,
I
nobody
think
wants
that's
to-
appropriate that both of you made that
I
motion.
knew you were going to say that.
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye.
O'Brien, aye.
Terrace, aye.
Walsh, aye.
Pat and I.
We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Good night.